In Ghost of Tsushima, Mongolian invaders who had successfully conquered most of Asia were attempting an invasion of the Japanese islands. With the first attempt of the Khan to seize Tsushima, Jin Sakai was a local samurai who had witnessed with his own eyes the devastation, brutality, and unrelenting nature of the Mongolian invasion on Tsushima. He later became the game's namesake, who waged a literal one-man war against the hundreds of Mongolian invaders, and inspiring the island's inhabitants to fight back against the Khan. But the speculative scenario is this: what exactly was the ghost style of combat that Jin Sakai used? When the Mongolians first landed upon Tsushima, according to dialogue mentioned by countless characters, all had it that the conventional aspects of warfare implemented by the samurai were strictly done by the code of Bushido, or local, perhaps even regional aspects of combat, essentially a gentleman's agreement as to what could be done, should be done, or not allowed, or even consented to in terms of battle or confrontations. As a result of these rules of engagement, the island's defenders as well as locals suffered massively under the occupation of the Mongolian invaders. Tsushima was nearly conquered by the time Jin Sakai realized that something more needed to be done, and if nothing was done, they'd be conquered much like the rest of northeastern Asia. Jin realized that in order to fight against the Mongolian invaders, they would need to change their methods of combat against the Mongolians, and do whatever was necessary to stand against them. Lord Shimura was fiercely against this, and opted for more of the same styles of combat tactics and codes of conduct which nearly cost them the island. Jin at first believed in the code of the samurai, but eventually came to realize that something else was needed. Personally taking part in the failed defense of Komoda Beach. As depicted in the game, he had to slowly recount all of the vows that he had made for handling battles or waging war. He had to sacrifice his beliefs to save himself, his family's domain, the people of his island, as well as everything he had loved and cherished. Jin decided to become just as ruthless as the Mongolians themselves, as dialogue from Yuna on multiple occasions held his ruthlessness to be possibly even worse than the Khan's forces. Yuna said that his movements were as a demon's, and his reflexes were quicker than a normal man's. Kenji mentioned that if he had not seen Jin acting as the ghost with his own eyes, he would have never believed it to have been humanly possible. Dialogue between Jin and Norio had him say that being the ghost was mentally and spiritually exhausting, and as a result of everything he had done, Jin wondered if even the gods would have eventually forsaken him. Norio didn't have an answer for him, but as to what Jin had done by becoming the ghost was something that was essentially a natural reaction to what the Mongolians had done. Someone had to do something, and Jin was that someone. Taka even helped to craft Jin's specialized ghost armor, which was the only attire in the game that brought out Jin's full potential as the ghost. Everything about it was completely different from the other forms of Japanese armor for confrontations. Jin commented that by wearing Taka's armor, he literally felt as and even looked like a ghost. The actual ghost style of fighting was triggered by a number of occurrences that happened with Jin, with one occurrence leading into the other, thus unleashing the ghost of Tsushima upon the Mongolians. The realization that the people of Tsushima needed to do more against the Mongolians, not only to defend themselves but to ultimately save their island home, had Jin mentioned through dialogue multiple times that more needed to be done to push back the Khan's forces. Originally full of resolve for the defense against the Mongolians, Jin, realizing that conventionally based warfare or tactics against the Khan's forces weren't working. The disaster at Komoda Beach was mentioned by multiple characters multiple times throughout the story. Jin knew more needed to be done, but with the code of the samurai by forbidding certain types of conduct as well as holding oneself in battle against opponents wouldn't necessarily work partially or even entirely against the Mongolians. In particular, during the warrior's code, Jin often grappled with his feelings or emotions based on what he was taught against what was considered to be practical against the Mongolian invaders, which were assassination-based techniques hidden against the Mongolians when the opportunity were to have arisen. Even with Jin deciding to use what samurais and others would call uncouth-based attacks against the Mongolians, he actually starts to gain ground against the invaders and realizes that he has to not only combine different styles of attacking as well as ideological senses of battle, he has no choice but to abandon other ideals that he formerly cherished to help fight back against the hordes. Taka's untimely and tragic demise was what brought all of his prior reasons together to decide in that instant to defend against the Mongolian invaders. He must become even more vile than they were. After Jin had become the ghost for the first time, as well as later speaking with Yuna, he grieved the loss of Taka and mentioned that Taka being beheaded by the Khan, as well as Jin's helplessness at seeing Taka's murder and not being able to do anything, was the exact catalyst for unleashing the ghost. Jin's ghost method of combat was largely improvised by what he had experienced, and it became more than just simple concerns by those around him. Besides the drastic changes in personality that Jin exhibited while using his ghost-based combat techniques, Lord Shimura mentioned that for the status quo of Tsushima Island, the ghost couldn't be given any legitimacy by local samurai, nor credibility among the peoples for what Jin had done by protecting Tsushima with his methods. Jin's ghost-based combat was considered too brutal for Tsushima, and as word spread of what he was doing, the inhabitants of Tsushima began to copy his tactics and improvise his methods of fighting even further. Lord Shimura said that his methods and ideologies of combat were so appealing, yet so dangerous, the shogun deemed it to be a danger to their own power and influence. Jin's largely improvised ghost-based methods on self-made style of combat largely changed the direction of the Mongolian invasion of Japan, and what Jin later did became legend throughout Tsushima. Jin changed combat strategies, conduct, and outcomes on Tsushima in terms of the canonical lore for the Ghost of Tsushima video game.